Sorry. Hi, my name is Shelly.
I'm Amanda.
And I'm Amy.
And we're here to tell you a little bit about Sidewalk Soldiers. So let's start with Amy. Can you tell us how Sidewalk Soldiers got started?
Sure. Sidewalk Soldiers formed in 2016, and it was a group of survivors that formed our first outreach team. So it was just women who had similar stories that were in recovery together that kind of discovered they had each had a past of exploitation. So they formed a team and hit the streets in Dayton really just to connect with people and warn them about the dangers ahead, but also just share their stories of hope and let them know that there's hope out there and there are resources that can help them. So we started as an outreach team, but then over the years we've added things like peer support, advocacy for survivors and victims, and mentorship for survivors and victims. Then in 2023, we opened the Safe Haven Drop-In Center on Xenia Avenue, which is basically just a place that the women can come in off the streets, receive case management, receive prayer. We have clothing, we have food and other resources available to them. Right now we operate using 3 service pillars. The first one is prevention, the second one is intervention, and the third one is ongoing support. So intervention looks like getting out into schools, universities, churches, and businesses locally and training people what human trafficking looks like, what are the signs, and how to respond. The intervention piece is more of the frontline work that we do with outreach. So that might look like street outreach, hotel outreach, online outreach, and then again, the Safe Haven Drop-In Center. And so the aim of those is really just to build rapport and identify people who might be at risk or who potentially are being trafficked, and just make connections with them. Build that rapport so that when they're ready, that they would reach out to us in hopes of creating a safe exit strategy. And then the final one is ongoing support. And so what that looks like, it could be support groups, peer support, mentorship, discipleship, and case management.
So it sounds like there's a lot of really good stuff going on, Amy.
There is a lot of good stuff, and we have some big visions for the future too.
Nice. Amanda,
Hi.
how do we get involved with Sidewalk Soldiers?
So there's many ways that you can get involved with Sidewalk Soldiers, from praying for people, writing encouraging notes for people. You can volunteer at our center. There is some training involved with volunteering at the center. We have 2 different types of volunteer training for the center. You can volunteer in the basement because we do have clothing and shoes and things like that. So there's a lot of organizing and getting things ready down there that involves that. So we also have packing of purses. We do that down in the basement as well. Upstairs is a little more extensive training because we want to give the people we're serving the best of care. So that involves some online training, in-person training, Narcan training. And once you get those trainings, you are able to volunteer upstairs to help the women that come in the door, because a lot of them have had trauma and other things that we want to be able to relate to. And if we can't relate, we at least want to be able to educate ourselves on how to speak with them and about what they've went through. The next thing is we have street outreach and hotel outreach, and that involves training as well, not as extensive as in the center, but training. And it's where you go out on the streets, you pray with people, you give them purses, you give them information and things like that. Hotel is the same way. Or you can always donate snacks for the center. We have people who come in and they don't get lots of food, and so they're hungry. And so we provide snacks, water. Sometimes we do potlucks. We do a Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas dinner. We do Christmas parties, so you can volunteer at that. We speak at many places. You could become someone who goes on these outreaches to speak at places, to inform people of who we are and what we're about. There's just the limits of volunteering with us are just limitless, and we want to just involve anyone and everyone that wants to be involved.
So you touched a little bit on outreaches, whether they're hotel or street. What's our goal when we do those?
I think Amy kind of touched on it a little bit. It's to, on that pillar, it's the first one really, it's to build the rapport, to let them know that they're seen, that they're heard, that they're loved, and that people do care about them and love them and want to help them. And just making that initial meet with them is what matters 100% of the time, because without that, we don't know if they're going to come into the center. We don't know if they know there's help out there for them. So I have to say that is the number one reason we do it, is to let them know that they're seen, that we see them, that we love them, and that we want to help them.
Can I respond to that real quick?
Absolutely, go ahead.
So the connection piece is huge, because when they are ready, and it's really a timing thing with most of the people that we encounter, but when they're ready, they have our card, they know who to call, they're familiar with us, so it is huge to get out there and make those connection piece. But we also, in the bags that we give them harm reduction supplies. We're just trying to keep them well and okay until they're at a point where they might be able to make that decision to leave the situation they're in, or to receive help. So that might look like passing out Narcan or warm supplies or fentanyl test strips or condoms. Those are all things that we put in addition to the hygiene and the snacks that we put in the outreach bags.
So Amy, tell us what trafficking looks like in our community.
So what it commonly looks like in Dayton, Ohio is somebody that somebody may know, getting to know them, intentionally recruiting and grooming people due to vulnerabilities. So those vulnerabilities really look different for each person. It could be anything from mental health to substance use disorder to financial hardship. It could be a child, because a child's not emotionally or financially stable to take care of themselves. And often when they're exploited, it's people that they trust the most. So vulnerabilities look completely different, but really what it looks like is everything. It looks the opposite, actually, of everything that we've always been taught by media, social media, and Hollywood that trafficking looks like. So while we're busy looking for people that are, trans, and not to say that this doesn't happen, but it is less common that it's actually transport or maybe kidnapping and they're locked away. Often victims are in plain sight. They come and go. They're free to come and go. They're really held by these chains of fear and psychological coercion, or the chemical chains of addiction. So that's what it really looks like. And the thing with our population and who we serve, there's a huge intersectionality of substance use disorder and human trafficking, and that wasn't recognized prior to a decade ago, right? There was just a lot of stigma that came around substance use disorder. So it just wasn't talked about. For whatever reason, people believe that people with substance use disorder were less of victims, but it's so common that that's who these trafficking victims and survivors are here locally. So a lot of the women and men that we work with have a substance use disorder that usually has to be treated, co-occurring with mental health or trauma. So that's typically the population that we're seeing. We serve about 90% women. We do have some that are youth, and we're moving more into the youth space going forward. And I'm going to let Amanda share about that in a second. But there are men that are trafficked too. And so we're trying to also piece together, whether that's mentorship, discipleship, or peer support, some services to serve the men here locally in Dayton as well. Did you want to speak to the youth side? Because I know that's what you're super passionate about.
Yeah, so I'll speak on it a little bit, because we haven't really ventured into it too far, but I think our goal is to reach the youth before they get to where the adults are, or if they're there, that we get them their needs met. So we get them the support they need, the education they need, because I feel like, I'm going to say it, what that guy told me. So there was a professor who said, I want to be up creek, stopping people from jumping in, instead of down creek, pulling them out. And I think that is really the goal in working with the youth, so we can educate them, show them the red flags. They may be going through something that is trafficking and not even know, because they've just come up in it. So education is really important, showing them that there are people out there that are willing to help them and love them, and to not be afraid of that. So I think that's kind of the goal.
So we've just touched on some really good stuff here. One, we're going to start with the next generation.
Yeah.
So that way we can break those generational curses.
Yeah.
And two, with that education, we can stop the stigma that has kept a lot of people stuck for so long in that world. So next, Amy, let's talk about what do you think a survivor would want the world to know?
about human trafficking.
About human trafficking, about them, period, anything.
So I'm a survivor of human trafficking, and I've attended survivor support groups and conferences and networked and mentored a lot of survivors over the last decade. And what I often hear from survivors is they don't even realize what was happening to them at the time that it was happening. They may not identify it as exploitation. In my case, I was very much in love with the man that was trafficking me. So it was very hard for me to make that differentiation when things started going bad, that he was bad, because I had looked at him with just such pure love. So I was recruited and groomed by somebody that was a Romeo trafficker, and they basically sell you a dream. He came to me. I thought he was a blessing from God, really, at the beginning. He did sell drugs. I was spiraling out of control with my drug addiction at the time, and I was recruited by somebody that he knew. So in my sick mind at the time, though, I thought everything was okay. I was good with the fact that he sold drugs, because to me that was free drugs. But I turned a blind eye to any little red flags about him, and he was somebody who really noticed every little detail about me, made me feel special, built me up at times that I felt low, and was like a father figure to me. So I quickly just fell in love with him and trusted him. And then as my addiction spiraled out of control, I got to a point where I was pretty much estranged from everybody that knew and really cared about me and loved me. So I became totally dependent on this man financially, for the drugs and stuff, eventually within a 9-month period. So this all happened within 9 months. Saying all this to say that Stockholm Syndrome is a real thing, and that's where the survivor, the victim or survivor, really doesn't make that disconnection in their brain that there is something wrong or something happened to them, because they have those trauma bonds with the trafficker. So a lot of people don't realize what happened to them. A lot of times at first it takes really talking to them, slowly and subtly educating them about what human trafficking looks like, and then showing them what healthy relationships and friendships look like on the other side, because it did take months and months and months where I had this connection even after being removed, even after feeling stupid, I guess, when I started to admit to myself what had really happened. The first time that I had a life coach, I was probably 2 months away from my trafficker. The first time my life coach called me a domestic violence survivor, and she called him a pimp. And it hit a nerve with me. And then I went into this season of like feeling stupid and shamed, and how could somebody educated and all these things let something like this happen. So there's just a lot of psychological stuff going on with victims, especially victims of sex trafficking specifically, but sometimes they don't know. And sometimes the other thing is, sometimes they're not going to ask you for help. Sometimes they're not going to trust the people that are supposed to help them, or strangers, because everybody that they've trusted and opened up to has screwed them over in some way. So you could be standing next to somebody in line at Walmart that's a trafficking survivor, and they may have a chance and an opportunity, but they're not always going to reach out for rescue. It could be out of fear. It could be out of fear of not knowing that person or what to expect next, but it's also tied back to that Stockholm Syndrome, because I didn't see anything beyond my trafficker at that point.
There's also the element, which I can speak to, of this is just what happens next.
Yeah.
You know, we don't feel like we deserve to be saved, rescued, helped, because we lived a lifestyle that this is just what happens next. And so after that comes, this is just how I'm going to die. Like, that's just how my mind was at the end.
And I like that you said that too, because the other piece is sometimes victims take on this mentality that they were an accomplice to this the whole time. Mm-hmm. Like, I was out here. So I was groomed to have a very healthy fear of law enforcement, because my trafficker constantly said to me, what are you going to tell them you're doing out here prostituting? So I knew I may go to jail. And so eventually something switched in my mind where I'm doing these things. And it's not that I question whether I was being forced to or not, but at some point I did feel like I was an accomplice, like I was dirty, like I was responsible for some of this stuff. And then it led to exactly what she was talking about, which is this is just how it is. I didn't see hope beyond that, and that's just how it's going to be. I'm just going to take it like it is because, hey, it could get worse, right? So I better just stick with what I've got. Yeah, good point.
Okay, one right there.
So let's talk about trafficking and what networking looks like.
So I feel like it can look like a lot of different things. You obviously have the one man show. That's the guy who, he's the only one. He does all the grooming, all the pimping, all the money keeping. But then you also have a different piece of it too, where you have multiple people. You have one person that's the guy, but then you have somebody that does one part, somebody that does another part, somebody does another part, and they all come together to make the one trafficking, I think.
Yeah, so because it can be people are just doing the recruiting. So like back when I was trafficked, we had something that we called drivers. Mm-hmm. So they would drive to out calls. They're just as guilty in the whole scheme of things. And then as in my case too, there was somebody that was recruiting for my trafficker, and then he did the grooming, the coercion, and the actual like exploitation. So it can look different. And so some can be networked and some isn't. But even when it's not networked, I do feel like there's a lot that has to happen for it to allow it. So yes. There could be people that turn a blind eye to it, people that are silent accomplices that don't even know. I was at one point, I think Amanda shared earlier that she was too. So I was participating and I had access to a bank account. So I was used to post some ads, to buy Bitcoins and stuff, to post these ads. And so that could technically be trafficking too. But the thing that hurt me, I guess, the most is the people that I thought were my friends that knew what was happening, that turned a blind eye. So that can look totally different. I mean, for every person, but I had people that smiled in my face or that introduced me to him or that vouched things for him. And then on the other side of that, there were also organizations and businesses that very much knew or should have had an obligation to know what was going on. For instance, I stayed in hotels that would receive tips to leave extra towels and washcloths in the bathroom for the guests to clean up themselves after they would come see me. And so that was as simple as a $5 or $10 tip from my trafficker to the housekeeping. There's nobody in the hotel that I was trafficked out of for 6 months on Miller Lane. There's nobody there that worked there that didn't know something was wrong. It could also look like when the police come on site, that they call the room or tip off the trafficker, the people that work at the front desk. It could look like holding somebody in the lobby because they know you have another guest in your room. It could be calling your room phone to tell you that somebody has arrived and asked for your room. And I'm saying all these very specific things because all of these happened to me at local hotels. There are also businesses that let him park different vehicles. So he wanted to lay low and not be on the radar. And there were some hotels that have heavy trafficking activity on Miller Lane. And there were task force and sheriffs that would go through and run license plates at some. But he had women there because those were the places that maybe not people on Skip the Games or Backpage.com were looking up, but it would be the people that were driving trucks or the construction workers who would be here for 2 weeks at a time. Those were the hotels that they were going into. And so he had to be there, right? He had rooms there. He had drugs to keep the women going that he called our medicine. I'm bringing your medicine because he made sure that we stayed drugged out, dependent on it. And he also manipulated and controlled us by giving us certain sedatives and things at times. So he would park his vehicle up the road at Speedway and at another restaurant and walk over to those hotels, and they knew it. And they would see him park his car, or he'd throw him a few extra dollars. What people are willing to turn their head to for an extra tip, a lot of the times at the hotels, the reason that they would turn their head is because people would, or my trafficker would come in and have maybe 5 to 10 rooms at that same hotel in a same night. So that was revenue to them, and they would turn their head because of that. The other thing people did that I don't think they realized was aiding in trafficking is they would get drugs or incentives from him for putting the hotel rooms in their name. So there were people that were accomplices in that way too, because those hotel rooms couldn't be in his name. They wouldn't be in any of the girls' names. So he would actually pay people to put the hotel rooms in his names.
And they only get to see the good side of him.
Yeah.
That good guy. You know, I'm just trying to help these girls out. I'm just trying to keep them safe. I'm just trying to make sure nobody hurts them. You know what I mean? So these people think that these girls are doing this because they want to. You know, they don't understand that they're a slave to a drug or to this lifestyle. And he's like, oh, I'm a great guy. I take care of my girls. You know what I mean? And so these people think that they're innocently just helping, and really they're not.
Yeah. So, because it can be either way. And some just overtly knew what was happening and they just didn't care. They just didn't want to be involved. I've been beat up in public places, and right when we were dumping off a car to walk over to a hotel, I got beat up and almost forced to perform oral sex on somebody in a parking lot when people stood around. One person called 911, and that she was an older lady, and I kind of separated stuff up. But then I had to go in and see those same people the next time we went to these places. So it is very important for businesses to realize, especially hotels, to realize that they have an obligation to know what is going on and to report when that stuff happens. And it's also important for us to realize ways that we may or may not be contributing and not realize it. So indirectly, people were used that didn't know they were participating as they were participating.
And that's something else I try to really focus on our digital platform is it's important that if you see it, report it. We are morally obligated to do that. These people are at a point in their life where they can't do it for themselves, and we should do it for them. And that's just something I would really like to ask people. Like, if you see something, for me, I would rather report it and be wrong than not report it and would have been right. For me,
Amen.
I would rather report it and be wrong than not report it and would have been right.
Amen.
So we've done a lot of stuff today. We hope that you enjoyed getting to know more about Sidewalk Soldiers. But before we finish, we just want to wrap up with how you report. So if you need help, if somebody that you love needs help, somebody in your neighborhood, a friend of a friend, if you just see it on the street, it is our moral obligation. Let's please help these ladies and gentlemen and children. You can call the National Trafficking Hotline. That number is on the screen. If you're in Montgomery County, you can call 937-225-HELP. We have been blessed with an organization right in our county that we have a great relationship with that will get you to us. In the meantime, you can also reach out to us on our website, which is sidewalksoldiers.net. And then you can also reach us by telephone, and that number will be on the screen also.
And so we are also able to do the education piece that we talked about earlier. We will come to your school, your university, business, or church, and do some human trafficking training that'll teach you trauma-informed responses to victims and survivors, how to learn the signs, and then how to act. The other thing is, if you are part of a hotel and you would like to have a group come out and talk to you about how to recognize the signs, the best way to connect with victims or survivors, and how to support it, we are happy to do that. Again, you would just contact us through www.sidewalksoldiers.net or the phone number, which she said will be displaying on the bottom of the screen.
Thanks for spending this time with us. We appreciate it. And let us know if you can want to help us fight this good fight.
Thank you.